Welcome to this Pre-COP26 knowledge exchange, which is a breakout session that we're in to talk about cities and nature, because of course we, by and large, now do live in cities, and cities are a rapidly growing environment. Increasingly more and more people live in them. And along with the densification of our cities, we've come to realize how incredibly important it is that people have access to a quality green space in that environment. So today we have 2 or 3 speakers. We're hoping to find Lillian, we've slightly lost her, who are going to address aspects of the nature provision in cities. And between us, we will foster a discussion. So our participants are sharing their experiences and knowledge and projects that enhance or work with nature in urban centres. So these are regreening and rewilding projects, potential infrastructure projects, green infrastructure, our parks, blue infrastructure, the water that we have, and sometimes we have green-blue systems that are like SUDs, our sustainable urban drainage, that are sometimes one and sometimes the other. So these aspects of urban design and architecture that work with nature are going to be presented today. The urban projects that speak to the nexus of both marine and terrestrial ecosystems will be welcomed in our comments. But what we're hoping to get from our speakers is real on-the-ground experience of their work in their cities. I am Tilly Collins. I am a Senior Fellow and Deputy Director of the Centre for Environmental Policy in London, England, where it is afternoon. So from here I say good afternoon. But for those of you on the Canadian side, it's very much good morning. We have a rapporteur, Alex Taylor, who is in charge of keeping our notes, and people who will be keeping notes as well. If you, in the chat, there is a Google Docs into which people can put any notes that they feel relevant or things that they find noteworthy about the discussion. So our first speaker today is going to be Jason Weiler, who is a parks ecologist in Calgary in Alberta. And Jason is a restoration ecologist with over 10 years experience working in this sector. He is a certified ecological restoration practitioner through the Society for Ecological Restoration and a professional biologist in the province of Alberta. He works with an urban conservation portfolio where for the past 5 years he's been developing the park's habitat restoration programme. He also manages a variety of types of restoration projects, including meadow naturalisation and riparian bioengineering projects, both of which are helping to provide nature-based solutions to some of the challenges that city is currently facing. Our second speaker, Lillian Hengleng, is in Brazil and has a very different experience, and we're hoping we're going to be able to connect with her, but at the moment she's a little lost in the system. But she works for something called Phytorestore, which is a technology company using plants in bioremediation and is a substantial advocate for nature-based solutions. Kyle, our second or third speaker, depending on how things work out this afternoon, is the Regional Greening Coordinator for the York region and is responsible for the delivery of the York region's greening strategy. So he's there to implement a number of tree planting agreements. And in this role, he supports partnerships with many partners to meet strategy goals. So Kyle has a bachelor's degree in environmental science and has solid experience in that he's worked in the waste industry in the Niagara region, which I imagine is a stakeholder management challenge of no great proportion, of immense proportion. But implementation, of course, requires the most enormous amount of stakeholder engagement, and managing multiple partners often comes back to that British expression of herding cats. Without further ado, I am going to hand over to Jason for our first presentation this afternoon or this morning. Jason, the table is yours.
Thanks very good morning, afternoon, good evening, everybody. Thanks very much for inviting me to speak at this event. So today I'm going to just provide a bit of a snapshot of a few examples of nature-based solutions that we're currently working on in the city of Calgary. So I do have a few slides, just with some photos that I'll have up while I speak. So I'm just going to share my screen now. Okay, you can see that okay? Okay, perfect. Okay. So yeah, I'm a parks ecologist in our urban conservation group at the City of Calgary, and currently I've been working on a number of different projects across the city. But before I dive into some project examples, I just wanted to provide a little bit of Calgary context for you. Just getting used to the multiple windows, sorry. So Calgary is a city with a population of 1.4 million, and we're located on the foothills mountains in Alberta. Our city falls within the transitional zone that's located between the foothills parkland forest to the west and our fescue grasslands natural subregions to the east. But the majority of our city, I'd say, falls within the grassland natural subregion. So with that, this area of the country is a semi-arid environment, definitely subject to periodic drought, usually occurring during our summer months. So our city's close proximity to the mountains provides many benefits and opportunities, with access to wilderness and areas that are rich in biodiversity within about an hour's drive west of the city. However, being located in a transitional ecozone also comes with its challenges. So because we are in a semi-arid environment, there are concerns about water shortages into the future. And Calgary has already been seeing the impacts of climate change in recent years with the increasing frequency and severity of natural disasters. 2013 flood that happened in Calgary, which caused $1.6 billion worth of damage. And then more recently, just last year, we had pretty bad hailstorms in the northeast section of our city, which damaged a lot of property and caused about 1.2 billion. So those events, the natural disasters, those are definitely starting to occur more. And I think being in that kind of transitional ecozone, we're subject to a lot of those changes because we already are kind of in a transitional area. And we get the Chinook winds, which are quite intense coming off of the mountains as well. So to address some of these challenges, so at the city, we have many different policies, strategies, plans in place. But I just wanted to highlight two primary ones that are tackling some of these challenges. So our biodiversity plan that was passed by our city council in 2015. It has several different targets in. Basically, it's about managing reduce habitat fragmentation. And so through that process, we've developed what we call an ecological network, a mapped area that shows kind of our biodiversity cores and corridors that we're managing for. And then also in managing invasive species. But the projects that I'm speaking to today, we have an ambitious target of restoring 20% of Calgary's open space by 2025. So we're partway through our implementation period. And so I'll talk a little bit more about how things are going in it with some project examples in a minute or so. The second strategy is our climate resilience strategy. So it outlines several different actions and strategies to both reduce our contribution to climate change through reduction of energy management, reducing greenhouse gas emissions. So, and then also responding to change, implementing risk management measures to reduce impact of such extreme weather events and climatic changes on infrastructure and services. So more on the climate change adaptation side of things. So that's a quick kind of overview of some of the policy and a little bit of information about the city. And now I'm just going to talk briefly about two project examples that I've been working on. So the first, so as part of that restoration target, we do restoration in a variety of different habitats and different types of restoration across the city. One of the types of restoration that we do is meadow naturalization. So this image here is just an example of one of my project sites along Memorial Drive in Calgary, which is a fairly prominent location next to our downtown. So this area was formerly just a manicured or mowed turf park space along the road, and it's quite a busy road. So it was an underutilized park space. It's not like people were going there to hang out next to the busy road. So we can essentially, this project involved converting the turf grasses into more of a natural meadow plant community. Essentially we stripped the turf and sod in this area using a backhoe, and then we topsoil, seeded using a variety of different seed mixes and techniques, and also did some woody like shrub plantings as well. And over time, then this is slowly starting to transition to more of a native plant community that is more drought tolerant. And so this space would have previously been mowed 15 to 20 times per year, depending on like the growing conditions of that year. And so this project has helped one to just reduce and as we do more of these types of projects, I think cumulatively that will add or make a difference for our overall emissions. But also the biodiversity benefits that this project has provided. This photo was taken just in year 2. And so we're working with the University of Calgary researchers who are studying pollinator communities on some of our naturalization sites, and they're able to compare kind of regular traditional turf space versus a naturalized site. And we're definitely already seeing a huge increase in the diversity of different pollinator species with bees, butterflies, and all the different insect communities on these sites, which is great. And also just one other benefit there's many benefits to these types of projects, but just with time, I'll try to get on to the next project. Would just be that these areas then, rather than being frequently mowed, they become a bit of a carbon sink. So as the vegetation is allowed to establish, it helps kind of sequester, and also has those other benefits in the city of just providing more natural kind of green space. The second example that I wanted to share is riparian restoration and bioengineering. So we had a pretty severe flood in 2013. And our river valleys and riparian areas took a pretty big hit during that flood. So since that time, the city has several programs that are working to improve our riparian health and flood resilience through using plants and natural materials. So this is just one example. This project that you can see on the screen here. Very preliminary kind of results from just 1 year, but we're basically using native plant materials, willow stakes, a technique of bioengineering, so installing live willow cuttings into an eroding slope. And over time, it'll help to kind of transition these riparian areas back to less eroded, more natural plant community, but also the woody roots and like structure of the plants themselves will help stabilize the bank and reduce future erosion. So there's many projects like this happening across the city along the Bow River and Elbow River. And so that's just kind of an example of how we're using more natural kind of solutions to some of the city problems. And this technique, I would say, compared to traditional way of like if there's an eroding slope and throwing down riprap or like large rocks to prevent erosion, this is more of a natural solution. Definitely more cost effective, and it also has benefits for biodiversity, such as providing fish habitat, just more of a natural vegetative cover that's more to some of those impacts. And lastly, I just wanted to share, I just wanted to share 2 resources that we developed as part of the program, habitat restoration program. So in 2020, we had an initiative called Biodiverse Communities. And so there's a habitat restoration program manual that was developed, as well as a community involvement guide. So these two resources, the program manual kind of outlines how we approach doing these projects, and then the critical component of how we effectively involve, engage communities in this type of work. So these two resources that are out there that I'm happy to share. And that's a bit of a snapshot of some of the nature-based solutions, habitat restoration work that's occurring in Calgary.
Excellent, thank you very much. An interesting range of projects that you have going there. Calgary is not a city that I know. You have clearly some very dense areas in the heart of town there.
Absolutely.
But also some access to real green space on the outskirts, which is wonderful.
Yeah, for sure. As Calgary has expanded, so we do, with as many cities, we do have challenges with urban sprawl, being that we are in like a grassland region. There's no kind of physical barriers such as mountains to prevent development. But with that, I think as our city has expanded, we've been able to conserve and protect critical areas. So we do have a relatively large, what we call an ecological network across the city that's quite diverse.
And do you find the citizens supportive? Do you get a very unified voice, or do you get a great diversity of voices saying very different things as you work on these urban regeneration projects?
Yeah, I would say that it is a diversity of responses to these types of projects. But generally, being so close to the mountains too, I think a lot of people that live in Calgary, they love nature. They move here to have access to such beautiful like wild areas to the west. So I think generally, yeah, people are fairly positive to wanting to our efforts to green the city and bring more nature back in, because they love going to the mountains on the weekend too to experience it.
Excellent. Well, in the absence of Lillian, I think coming up next is you, Kyle.
I'm happy to dive right in.
Welcome.
Hello, everyone. As you heard in my brief bio, I'm the Regional Greening Coordinator for York Region, or the Regional Municipality of York. So in this role, it's a lot of direct work with the broad spectrum of Canadian government, so at our federal, provincial, and municipal level, as well as working closely with a lot of non-governmental organizations, so charities and other groups that are working for the public benefit. A bit of context for York Region. So we are an upper tier municipality, which means that we work with a number of lower tier municipalities to manage different things together. So we are just north of Toronto, and I've learned very quickly that's how I describe where I live to anyone not from Canada. Just north of Toronto, they at least know where that is. So it's made up of 9 local municipalities. And we have a population of about 1.2 million. It's a bit of a unique space. So we're broken into 2 watersheds that go into 2 major water bodies. And we contain within our borders, or shared with a number of our neighbors, a highly sensitive shallow aquifer known as the Oak Ridges Moraine. So this is a protected area that, there's very low chances of development, in an area that we want to ensure maintains natural to help buffer it. So the landscape varies throughout. We have a number of major urban areas. I believe 4 of our municipalities are considered urban cities now, while the other 5 contain smaller towns and kind of large rural agricultural areas. So we've got kind of that farm close to the city vibe going throughout, and it creates some unique challenges for us. So the team I work on is responsible for managing a number of different kind of components. A few major ones related to our urban areas, including our street tree program, which looks to plant large street trees on urban, or I'll say on regional roads, not necessarily just urban ones. As well as managing our York Regional Forest, which is 23 properties totaling about 2,500 hectares of protected forested areas. I won't be focusing too much on that today because we're talking about urban, but it is a key resource that we have that we hope to provide that access to our urban residents as well. The other major component is our regional greening strategy, and this focuses more on that on-the-ground action within York Region. All of this also ties into a key regional target, which is we're seeking 40% canopy cover by 2051. We're currently at 31%, so we have a ways to go, but we've got lots of strategies to do it. My hope today is that we can talk briefly about two projects that we're working on. The first of these projects was developed through working directly with our federal government through a program called the Disaster Mitigation and Adaptation Fund. This has traditionally been available to municipalities within Canada as a funding source for gray infrastructure projects to help mitigate significant weather-related events or disasters triggered by climate change. So this would largely be related to water management, stormwater drainage, things like that to help mitigate those impacts. York Region is one of the first projects that was approved for green infrastructure instead of gray, with a focus on tree planting, as well as a few other urban infrastructure pieces, including the installation of 35 kilometers of low impact development soil trenches under our street trees, and the planting of 200,000 urban trees over the next 7 years. So it's a big one for us to tackle, but I'll share a bit of information about it and how we're working through it. So we have about, like I mentioned, 200,000 trees that we're trying to plant in urban areas. And anyone who works in urban areas knows that that's a lot of trees to try and fit in between the parking lots and the houses and everything else that's there. And these ones are targeted specifically at mitigating the effects of extreme heat events and reducing the urban heat island. Through this process, we've taken a couple of different avenues to try and reach it. One of them is that we are seeking to naturalize our own properties that we own throughout the region. So the region is responsible for a number of water wells and other pumping stations located in urban areas. So we've tried to naturalize those where we can and plant trees. But a significant portion of these trees we've begun to partner with local organizations to try and provide them with funding to be able to naturalize their own areas and their own public or private lands to provide that public benefit. A number of these organizations include our local conservation authorities. For areas that don't have those, they're just organizations responsible for managing and protecting individual watersheds. So we've worked directly with them. One of our local First Nations has participated in the program to plant trees in their community. Our individual local municipalities have had access to the funds. And then, as I mentioned, NGOs or not-for-profit organizations are also eligible to apply if they have an eligible partner with areas to plant trees. So along with the funding and the support that we're looking to provide to these groups, the region has also developed a tree planting prioritization tool, which is available to our interested partners. And it's basically a web-based app that incorporates a ton of different data that we have available about our lands. So they can access water quality information, flooding information, even the urban or even the land temperature information. So it does a number of back-end calculations and helps these people identify areas that would have the highest priority for tree planting. And along with those prioritizations around land use data, we've incorporated data about vulnerable populations. So where there's higher senior populations, is there a school there? Things like that allow them to kind of incorporate all that information and prioritize where they're going to be planting trees. So we've provided this tool that we've developed to any applicants to allow them to better prepare their applications and focus a bit more. So along with that, so I've mentioned we're working with a number of external partners, but it's also just included a broad swath of internal teams. So typically we're pretty focused on ourselves and planting trees, but we've brought in our transportation team, our infrastructure asset management teams and our capital development teams to get this cross lens to make sure that this very big task that we have ahead of us is being managed in an effective way. I'm going to take 2 more minutes, I'll say, to share one other small project that we work on. And this one's not quite on the same scale, but I think it's one that's a bit unique and pretty significant for our local residents. So this program works directly with an NGO to plant large trees in individual landowners' backyards. So it's a backyard tree planting program with an opportunity to purchase subsidized trees. So we're reducing the cost to allow a bit more access to people to get their hands on a 5 to 8 foot tree, which could be a pretty significant expense if you're going to a nursery and trying to purchase that yourself. So the beauty of this program, or the benefit of this program, is that it's allowing people to gain access to these benefits of larger trees, reduced temperature, shade, the calming effect of just being around trees in their own backyards and at a more accessible price. Typically, their partner is planting about 600 trees per year through this program to help build that urban canopy. And it's also just tackling one of those more challenging areas for us to be able to engage, because we can't really go onto private lands and plant trees. So we really need landowners to have that engagement and that incentive to participate and help kind of build that canopy in areas that we can't access ourselves. With that, I think I'll stop there and say thank you for the time.
Thank you very much. So we still have our absent a speaker. So Lillian, I don't think, is joining us from Brazil. So I'm going to take a kind of moderator privilege and talk a little bit about how different things are in London. So we have a very, very dense city, and our green spaces are extremely prescribed already, and they have very well established usage. The two things that we really face very intensely now are questions of social equity in our green space. The people who use the green spaces are a particular subset of the city dwellers, and that we have some people who feel very excluded from green space. So green space equity is not equally distributed amongst the people. And this is something we're beginning to think about very specifically. We have, to use two very, very simple examples, we have an issue with dogs. We have a very big issue with lockdown dogs. And that there are some social groupings that really don't like to be around dogs. And we have a lot of dogs in many of our parks. So we're having to think very seriously about having parks which exclude dogs, so that certain members of society really feel much freer and much more able to access those. We also have an issue with wealth, in that we have quite a number in some parts of the city, and this applies to many European cities, of people who simply can't access green space, not because it's not there, but because they have such issues with children getting wet and muddy, because they can't deal with wet and muddy clothes. So we've got a wealth issue, so that the most deprived children are also being most deprived of green space in some places. So these are things that echo in very intensely in our very, very high density cities. And I'm wondering if you get those kind of effects in your cities as well. Jason, do go.
Yeah, I would say, so maybe not to the extent, because we're not quite as dense as some of the European cities, but we do, so similar to what Kyle mentioned, that he has a prioritization tool for determining locations. For our restoration projects, we do use a similar, or a type of tool that has triple bottom line criteria. So we're looking at environmental, economic, and social factors when deciding where best to invest in restoring different areas. And so through that tool that we have, there is criteria around equitable access to nature, in Calgary, we do have a target of residents having some form of walking access within 400 meters to some form of green space within their residence. I don't know as much about that part of things, but it is a consideration, and definitely with when we're our restoration projects, when we do a lot of volunteer events as part of them to get the communities engaged and involved, and we definitely have really good turnout from a diversity of different groups. In our northeast section of the city, there's a lot of newcomers and immigrants that live in that portion of the city, and they are very passionate to come out and support restoration projects. So it helps kind of foster that sense of community and getting them involved in the process. So I would say in Calgary, it's definitely a consideration, and we also have our challenges with dogs.
Well, Kyle, can you comment on that quickly? And I've just seen Lillian has now joined. So in a couple of minutes, Lillian, we'll ask you to give your introduction and presentation. You were mildly introduced earlier, but we could do with a slightly bigger biog. But we're first just going to let Kyle address this point.
Yeah, I certainly think that we do experience those same inequities and accessibility issues. And it's something we're currently in the process of renewing or refining our greening strategy. And this conversation has come up quite a bit. It is a bit challenging for us because we don't necessarily own the public spaces in those urban centers to be able to try and kind of build that green space piece ourselves. So a lot of it is through those kind of supporting the local municipalities as well as other areas to try and increase that equitable access. And I mentioned briefly that we try and support schools, and we do have a specific program where the schools can apply to have trees planted. And I think that's one of the best ways, at least for kids. They're going to be there anyways. That gives them that access to green space. In that sense, I think you're right that there is a lot of challenges with families being able to just take the time even to go out and access those green spaces. And so a lot of our opportunities are they're trying to bring it to places they already are, or at least actively engage them in education about it to inspire them to potentially get there when they can. We've been exploring other opportunities to bring those vulnerable groups to nature where we can through busing programs and dedicated kind of outings. We've done a bit of this with seniors, and we have programs available to groups like our Boy Scouts and things like that, where they can basically sign up to have an educator, a natural environment educator out there with them to kind of give them the whole kind of tour of one of our forests. But yeah, so we're exploring those options, but it is a challenging topic to find an appropriate solution for each space. I will say we have lots of fun challenges with dogs as well, especially interacting with our forests have a heavy horse riding population, so horses and dogs get along not so well.
Yes, that was a big problem in Hyde Park, right in the centre of London, where there are public riding stables, and it's been very problematic with dogs, especially since lockdown. Lillian, welcome. I'm very glad you were able to join us.
I'm very happy to be with you, and sorry for being late. I was waiting in another room, so sorry. What I would like to share with you is a project that we have been working for 1 year now in Amazon. And then finally, I would like to share all these steps, how we get there, because I think sharing those type of experience, the before project, during and after, is very important. Of course, we are talking about a scenario here in Brazil, in Latin America, in a state, this state is called Amapá, is the most preserved state in the Amazon. They have 73% of their whole territory preserved, but we are talking about the wetlands area. So the city is just by the Amazon River with the flood. So the Amazon River rises up and down like 13 meters during season, so it's a very high tide, and the Amazon enters inside the city. This ecosystem is very important because the city is sitting in the exit from the Amazon to in the mouth of Amazon to the ocean. So it's very, very important for the biodiversity and what's happening. They are just putting piles and they are putting earth. They're really destroying the whole ecosystems. And of course, on the raining season, we have this kind of catastrophes where the water rushes all the wood houses from they have like 30 in this area 30,000 families. I can send the link here on the chat later so you can watch the movie and you will understand what I'm talking about. And the process is starting to sell nature-based solution in a area that is 6,500 hectares, like it's two major city for 1 million people. How do we engage? Politicians doesn't know. We start from this. They don't know what is nature, how they can work with nature, mainly on those cities that are inside surrounded by the mega forest, the largest forest in the world. So they think that progress is concrete, put concrete everywhere. So my job started working with the government, talking about that we are starting the new ecosystems restoration decade, and then we started to work. I had to study and learn his government plan, and then find inside of his plan what was linked to this program in the social area, on the environment area, in all these areas that connect a super huge program like this. After that, the government says, okay, I'm hiring something that we are not used to, our procurement are not used to, our control agencies are not used to. So the politician, they get very scared of hiring something that their control organs doesn't know and they don't know. So what I did, I got a document that was produced by the European Commission regarding, it was very helpful actually, procurement for hiring nature-based solution. And then I did, you have no idea, thousands of presentation for the control organs that they need to see that nature is different. It's not like building a road that we know the cost, how much asphalt goes, how much stones goes, gravel goes. You know, they have like their own table of prices. So I explained to them because we lack a lot of scientific information. So we had to go back and do A to Z. So we go with the biologists. So we go with the top professors and scientists in the country to check more than 12 groups of animals, checking how is the situation, what animals we have there. So it's fauna and flora. I'm sorry, I don't know in English, this researching in the field. So it's primary research to see what we have. We use the tool, the UCN Assessment Center for Wetland Toolkit. So we pass through all the steps on that. And then parallelly, to do this study of conception, we will selecting places where we will do parks. So combining natural parks, and we will see where they have, for example, they are destroying some, this time of the year, when enters the dry season, they put fire in the whole wetlands to collect turtles to eat. And this is a traditional thing, but it's a big health issue because it's the whole smoke in the whole state, because this is a traditional thing. So we have a big area taking care of educating, and a lot of groups doing workshops with the populations, teaching them how to work with that scenario, creating new jobs so they can switch from getting the turtles to sell getting another green jobs. So it's a huge program, and we are calling that's one of the best urban programs for the Amazon, because we thought from A to Z. I would love to share the screen with you, but I didn't prepare, didn't know if I could share or not the area for you. But it was a very, very big challenge. And then after you have the whole conception, because as a company, you have to study all that, to present to them all the possibilities, how great can be, how feasible can be, because we have a lot of programs like this in China, in Europe, and this is the largest in Brazil we are bringing now. And of course, after that comes where this budget come from. And then we have to help the government to get funding, because all the city and state budgets are like 90% compromised here in South America, in Brazil, actually. So we need to be creative, they are getting penalties from the guys, for example, who did mining. The public minister gave them tickets and penalties. So we revert this penalty into a budget from the government, so they can use this money. So the governor, Valdez Goss, he was extremely, surprisingly open-minded to face this, because if it doesn't come top down, the idea and the challenge and the will, the workers, the technical people will be afraid of going up with this new challenge, because if there's a mistake, if there's a problem, it's their job that's out. So after that, now we are hiring, and this is a 1-year program, and we convince everybody to transform this huge area in a conservation unity, following all the it's a national park now, and we are following the Hansar nomination for the wetlands area. I think that's it.
Fascinating. A very different context to the way that we've been thinking about things.
Yeah.
But thank you very much for joining us. Now we're actually kind of galloping out of time quite rapidly here. So what I'd like to do is look through the audience questions and try and ask you some of these questions. Now, one of the themes that is coming up is climate change, and whether you're thinking about planting the traditional species that have been present and trying to restore and maybe look back at nature, or whether you're considering the future and choosing the species that might be more appropriate to a future climate. Are you thinking in that way? Do you look back or forwards, or a bit of both?
Yes, we have to actually we do landscape restoring. So we just restore what's natural over there. We have a lot of exotic species, mainly through the landscaping, because most of the cities on the old times, they don't put like native trees. They used to have outside trees, and this goes to the natural area as well. In Rio de Janeiro, it was much more urban area. We have like a forest of a very, very, very terrible tree that come from Africa that was used to, we found those trees over there as well. It was used on the ancient, brought it because they thought that they could feed the cattle. And actually this tree, it's crazy, because every time we get seeds from it, it stays like 5 years in the soil, replanting, regrowing, and destroys the whole ecosystems. For example, in Rio de Janeiro, we did a very big lagoon as well. I think it's like 1,000 hectare lagoon, and half of the lagoon was destroyed by those trees. So we remove the tree and we replant with native trees.
Jason?
Yeah, so I can respond to that question. So absolutely, I would say when we're designing our restoration projects, we look at what we call a reference habitat. So kind of what community makes sense there historically, but also we are looking at predicted climatic changes for the area. So in Calgary, we're anticipated to get even hotter and drier and we already are in a grassland natural region. So we're definitely planting species that will be adapted for those drier conditions, more drought tolerant species into the future. And then with trees too, it's a bit of we absolutely we want to have an urban forest as best we can, but we are located within grasslands, so we're trying to find that balance because of the many benefits that trees provide in an urban setting. But we don't have as many locations where are suitable growing conditions for trees, so we're trying to find that balance of drought tolerant or maybe using different hybrid or cultivars for the future, just so that we can have a bit of an urban forest as well.
And for you, Kyle?
Yeah, climate change and the impacts to our natural areas is definitely top of mind. We've taken a few different approaches depending on the space. For our urban street trees specifically, we're not super concerned about trees that were here originally. We're concerned about trees that will survive beside a 2-lane road and packed between a sidewalk. But as we get into our more natural areas, our direct approach is always to try and go for native species, ones that were here originally, with some considerations at this point. The impacts of climate change are already here for us. We've had a number of invasive species that have completely decimated certain tree populations. Our ash tree species, I believe we've lost about 98% of them in the last couple of years due to the emerald ash borer migrating kind of north from the US. And they're just gone. They're not going to survive. And to try and plant ash trees at this point is a significant challenge that involves a lot of treatment just to keep them alive. So certain aspects like that, we've started to look for more tolerant species of the same genus, or in some cases, we just accept that tree won't be successful here for quite a while. On the other end, we have in some respects done migration trials. So looking at trees that are from climates that are slightly different, so usually a bit more southern, and where our climate is expected to go, to see how those trees manage and see if they'd be suitable for future considerations. But yeah, overall, we try and stick to previous native habitat that was there.
Wonderful. Thank you to Neil Jennings for those questions. And we have a question from Maria Alexandrova. And this is about NBS, nature-based solutions. And what do you think are the cities, the factors that have enabled these to be promoted in your cities and in your regions? In other words, do you think, has COVID contributed to this? Is it an increasing awareness? Because we are seeing a rise in nature-based solutions. What's driving it? Who would like to go first on that? Go, Kyle.
Sure. So I can jump in on kind of two pieces there. So York has been kind of pressing the issue, I'll say, for the last bit. And I mean, that would probably be one of the reasons why we're the first green infrastructure project under the climate change funding through our federal government. But definitely current situations like COVID, we saw a massive increase in the use of our green spaces as soon as lockdowns went into effect. Once people weren't able to go to the areas they would traditionally go, they saw that there was forest where they could still go get some exercise, distance, and socialize. And I think it really hit home for our decision makers. They saw that our capacity was almost maxing out, but that there was this demand for green space that hadn't been seen before. And I think that will drive some decisions going forward, more support for increasing the amount of green space or restoring the green space that we have to a better level. So I definitely think that it's been a significant factor and will continue to be a significant factor as we drive forward.
Yes, here in São Paulo, it was very nice because we start a program of creating a rain garden, because we are like the largest city in the whole America, and it's all concrete. So we have all the soil, how to say, impermeabilized, how to say, the soil is covered
Capped.
by
Yes,
cap.
capped.
Thank you. So the whole soil is capped. And what happens, we have a lot of areas with floods. They try to build the big, very big water reservoir, but of course, as the city grows and we get more and more capped, the water reservoir, they don't work anymore. And we start in a very small sub-municipality with 3 rain gardens. And we did all the calculations together with the municipality, how many water was going into the soil without running to the water reservoirs. And now this became, in 1 year, it was so famous. All the people, the neighbors, we did a lot of videos planting together, working with the community. And this became viral. And then what happened? The new mayor decided to become a new program for the climate change. And then also in Rennes, new areas, creating new green areas. I think this was very, very nice. And also in the main roads, they created the green walls. We did also the calculation for the carbon capture, and now it's blooming this in the whole city. Now we are having more than, I think it's 400 gardens. They create a program called Urban Kindness, where you exchange one slot from the parking place to a rain garden across the whole city. So it's very nice. And now the population is taking care, picking the flowers. It's very successful, the program.
Oh,
But
thank you.
you have to push. You have to do the first push and show, look, this works, this is nice. And then fortunately it was very successful. In São Paulo, a concrete jungle, as we call, is getting green.
So a range of mechanisms may drive this forwards, but the funding is always an interesting one. How you can get green infrastructure projects or blue-green infrastructure projects funded. And Neil makes a point and asks a question: is do you have any input financially from insurance companies who may be mitigating future losses by contributing now to urban greening? Jason.
Yeah, so I would say funding is definitely always a challenge for these types of projects. But given that Calgary, we have seen those direct impacts from flooding and hailstorms and stuff. Insurance companies here now are starting to provide grants to fund climate adaptation, nature-based solution type projects. So they're definitely realizing that investing, doing more proactive work will likely end up saving them money in the future. So yeah, we're currently looking at all different kind of options, different partnerships, grants, one source being from insurance companies, but other nonprofits, associations, that sort of thing. And then I think with COVID-19, also seen very similar trends of like increased usage in our parks and green spaces that have led to more degradation. And so I think our city administration is aware that that is an issue. The need for access to green space is so important. So I think in the future, more funds, more opportunities will likely be opening up pretty soon.
Kyle, any comment there?
I can't think of any examples here where there's been direct support or funding from insurance companies. But I don't necessarily think that it's not something that will happen. We've put a strong focus on kind of treating green infrastructure as an asset and kind of evaluating those costs. And I think kind of that research and mindset will really put into perspective for a lot of organizations what the cost and value of these assets are over time, and the mitigating cost that they provide when an ice storm or something like that or flooding could potentially occur. So yeah, at this time, I don't think I have any examples in York Region, but yeah.
Okay. Lillian, have you had participation from insurance companies at all?
Here, no, they don't even care. I never heard it, this is it's a very good idea you gave me, guys. Thank you. Because hello.
The
Yes,
next
hello.
business pitch. Yeah.
Very good. So Idil Boran has a question. I think we're going to have to answer it very quickly because we're soon going to be going to our break. How can we differentiate between the two types of equity in urban greening projects? So one of them is the equitable access to being able to co-design greening projects, which I think is really a question about how do we engage with the disengaged, the people who don't connect. And then the other end of that tail is the equitable access to the benefits. So is the getting people in. So how do we distinguish between access to co-design and access to benefits, and or do they fall in together? Question to Kyle. You can go first on that.
Yeah, that is a tricky one, and I don't know if I have a great answer for it. One, because a lot of our local green space isn't directly managed by us, so it is challenging for us to be engaged in that process. But I can speak to our forested areas, which we manage, secure items like that. Typically, when we're looking to operate a new property or secure a new property, there is a small process where we go out to the community just to get that insight. But yeah, I don't know if I have a strong answer for that one. So maybe I'll defer to others.
Jason.
So yeah, I would say so one of the resources that developed is the community involvement guide for restoration projects, and we definitely find, so when we initially started our program, it was quite small scale, small budgets, and so we didn't necessarily have the budget to do a full-on community engagement, but we definitely found that it was definitely more beneficial in the end to invest that time and effort into engaging communities prior to and getting their input into the design of projects, because in the end it ended up being that there's just a buy-in to the project, and also once it's implemented and long-term afterwards, those communities have that sense of ownership and stewardship over the area. So I think it's a critical component to this type of work. I think communities absolutely need to be involved right from the get-go.
Excellent. Lillian.
In this last link I sent is regarding the Parque Orla Piratininga in Rio de Janeiro. This project just worked because we had a lot of community engagement. So every session around this huge lake, we had to work with the fishermen's area, with the poor communities, with the rich communities, because it's a very mixed area for two reasons. Well, this area was the competitor of the politicians. So if they start creating gossips, all the houses will be removed, this will happen, we will destroy this, the environmentalists, they will destroy, they will put concrete. So if we don't have this work with all the communities, so we open workshops, we do workshops together with them. For example, in this park we have like 6 bridges for the fishermen to enter. Those bridges, they change so much, like during the project, like more than 10 times, because we need to really deliver what they need. They sometimes they need longer. They have their own way of we call artisanal, handmade way of fishing. So we adapt the whole project for them, and of course thinking, bringing all the other things. So we need to work with the community so we don't create problems, political problems, and in the other hand we also need to work with them so this green area can be useful for what they're doing, can help them to help to have the ecosystems working for them in a good manner. And also what Jason just said, to keep the program. When they build together, they will take care of the plants, they will take care of the equipment, they will keep clean, they will denounce if there, something is degrading or something, someone is doing something bad on it. So they take us their own garden, you know. This is how we do it. If we don't work with them, we have several parks that the 1 2 months after is completely destroyed. So our programs and our projects, they keep going because we have all, working with the community is a huge part of it, a huge part of the success of the implementation, I would say.
No.
I'm sorry for my poor English. It's so long
No,
that I
no,
don't speak
no,
English. I'm really sorry.
no. We understand you very clearly, Lillian. Well, I would like to thank Kyle and Jason and Lillian for giving us the benefit of their expertise this afternoon, for giving us your time and your knowledge. Thank you very much to everyone who's been watching and joining in with their questions in the chat. We've now got a 15-minute break before the next event, and our rapporteur, Alex Taylor, who is a student here in the Faculty of Liberal Arts and Professional Studies, well, at LAPS, not here, at York University. And he's very interested in raising public awareness with a passion for effective communication and knowledge transfer. So hopefully he's going to do an excellent job of reporting our studies or reporting this conversation. But thank you very, very much. Rapporteurs need to head to the main stage. And everyone else, I hope to see you on the main stage in about 15 minutes' time.
Okay.
Thank you, everybody.
Thanks very much.
Thank you.